Climate change is a major global issue, but its most severe impacts are often felt in vulnerable regions with limited resources. While much of the research on how organizations adapt to climate change has focused on high-income countries, this study looks at the critical decisions made by agricultural producers in a vulnerable context, specifically the cocoa-producing region of southern Bahia, Brazil, where communities already face harsh climate effects. We explored how more than 3,000 agricultural producers in this region are responding to the growing impacts of climate change, especially recurring droughts. These producers face a tough choice. As one of them put it, the problem is, does the agricultural producer die now, or does he die later? Now, he dies of hunger. Later, he dies of thirst, right? He prefers to die later of thirst. This study explores that challenging reality. It combines 4 years of panel data with in-depth interviews to understand how these producers are adapting. Surprisingly, the findings challenge what's often observed in higher-income countries. In this vulnerable setting, experiencing climate change, and even perceiving it as a serious risk, doesn't necessarily lead to long-term adaptive solutions. In fact, it often leads to the opposite. One surprising finding from our study is that direct experience of climate change, specifically a severe drought, was actually negatively associated with the adoption of adaptive strategies like reforestation, which can protect water sources and help retain soil moisture. This goes against a common assumption that the more people experience climate impacts, the more likely they are to adapt. But our qualitative interviews helped us understand why. For many producers, severe climate impacts created a sense of hopelessness. As one farmer put it, "We plant, replant, and it dies. Plant, replant, it dies. There's no rain. Everything we took care of, everything we watered, everything we did with love. It's no use." This feeling of hopelessness makes it harder to commit to adaptive solutions like reforestation, strategies that are effective, but take time to deliver results. Another key insight is that a higher perception of climate change risk was associated with more maladaptive responses, actions meant to reduce risk, but that actually degrade ecosystems and increase future vulnerability. One example is switching from cocoa farming to pasture and livestock. While this might bring short-term income or stability, it's a major driver of deforestation in the area and leads to greater water scarcity over time. This might seem counterintuitive because research from high-income countries suggests that the more risk people perceive, the more likely they are to take protective action. But once again, the interviews revealed deeper emotional dynamics. Fear was a dominant theme. One producer shared, "The drought is a big worry in everything in life. It's not finding something to drink, not finding something to eat, for food. Neither for us nor for the animals. That's why we worry so much." But this fear and the desire to avoid it often leads people to focus on immediate needs rather than plan for a frightening and uncertain future, even if that means choosing practices that harm the environment and increase vulnerability over time. This research develops a framework to explain these patterns, what we call maladaptive vicious cycles. We show how the experience of climate change can directly reduce adaptive responses, especially when it leads to feelings of hopelessness. At the same time, it can indirectly increase maladaptive responses through heightened risk perception and the desire to avoid fear. We refer to these situations as climate traps, self-reinforcing cycles where people's perceptions and ecological damage feed into one another, making future vulnerability even worse. This article offers a deeper understanding of climate change adaptation in vulnerable contexts and highlights the powerful role of emotions, like fear and hopelessness, in shaping how decisions are made. It shows that models developed in high-income countries often don't apply in these settings. To design effective interventions, we need to understand these emotional and psychological barriers and how they influence behavior on the ground. That kind of understanding is essential if we want to support long-term resilience for the communities most affected by climate change.